People who get locked into a vision. All right, that's it, man. That's their drive. That's their passion. Critics don't matter. This don't matter. They're going to do whatever it fucking takes to be the best at what they do.
We are back. Bonus content. Table Talk bonus content.
So the first one is Sean Wells here said, it's been said that maximum potential for a natural muscle hypertrophy is typically reached within 3 to 5 years of correct and consistent training. Is there a corresponding timeline estimate of yours or anyone else's for maximum potential and strength for a natural lifter? You made it sound like. That makes sense?
No, because I don't understand where this information is coming from. So, you know what? I'm still going to answer it, but understand that if this information is coming from, you know, a bunch of research studies that have all concluded exactly the same thing, which is highly unlikely, I think that the statement is bullshit. You know, that to say maximum hypertrophy potential is going to happen within 3 to 5 years, for who? You know, I have a lot of questions that would need to be addressed for that. You know, for who, for what, under what training protocol? Most people that I know that are trying to navigate muscle hypertrophy and to build as much muscle as they possibly can, it takes them about 3 years to figure out what really works. And then they end up hitting, I will say, here's what I will say. I will say that there are certain sticking points and there are certain ceilings, perceived ceilings, that you will hit in strength and in hypertrophy. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you can build as much muscle as a professional bodybuilder if you're natural, because that's just bullshit. Strength, on the other hand, I've seen and know for a fact several people who have broken all-time world records that were drug-free. And, you know, people can say I'm full of shit, and I know for a fact, you know, and because I know the people. And I also know that with a lot of those people, you know, I thought they were on at the time and thought they were lying to me. And it did kind of bother me a little bit because I didn't quite understand, you know, why in the hell, why are they lying to me? It's not like I'm going to go, you know, post all over the internet that somebody's doing this or doing that. It's just, it was just a weird thing. And, but keep in mind, I've been sponsoring lifters for over 20 years or close to 20 years now. And, but each and every one of them at some point in time, you know, told me that they were going to change their ways, you know, that they were going to start using. And in each one of the cases that I thought they were already on, because I didn't think it was possible to get as strong as what they were, clean, all their totals went up 250 to 300 pounds. And this is in the same gear. So we're talking multiply, and when the whole sport was pretty much using gear, either single ply or multiply. And the gear didn't change. You know, I can see it if you go from one squat suit to another squat suit, or you make alterations to a squat suit or something like that. There's going to be some carryover. And the carryovers were not, you know, is what a lot of people think they were. The carryovers were big, definitely, but nobody was, that I knew of, was getting 500 pounds out of a squat suit or anything like that. So it was a significant difference, and it was a wake-up call for me that people can get a lot stronger than they think being clean. It's just what happens in powerlifting and strength sports in general. And, you know, I was probably guilty of this as well until, I don't know, I was 20 some years old, 22 years old, something like that, until I grew up. You know, I thought everybody stronger than me was only stronger than me because they were taking drugs, or they had better drugs, or there was always some reason they were stronger than me that didn't relate to the fact that they were just stronger than me. you know, so it kind of comes with the territory until you mature in the sport and you learn that people are stronger than you. There's always somebody stronger than you. Doesn't mean you can't beat them. You know, if they have a bad day, you have a good day, and you're close enough in striking distance, you can walk away winning. So it's still a competitive sport. But throughout my own career, I had a couple totals that I just couldn't break, man. I was stuck in the 1900 range, 1900 to 2000, something like that. Not years, but total, for a long time, man. And it was all Western periodization and modifications of Western periodization. So nonlinear, linear, undulating periodization, every type of periodization you can think of that's kind of based upon or an alteration of a Western model. And I couldn't fucking get any better. It was frustrating. And I had professors at the time telling me that I had hit my genetic ceiling. And I bought into the bullshit because my technique was good. Yeah, it wasn't like I was going to fix the technique and pick up more there. At least to me, I thought my technique was good. And then I moved to Columbus and started training with Louie and ended up picking up 400 pounds or something like that on my total. So, you know, so those limitations, some of them are self-imposed. There definitely are limitations on your genetic structure, or however you want to phrase it, on how big you're going to be or how strong you're going to be, I'm sure. But I've yet to meet the person that's hit it. Let's put it that way. You know, there's always a way to put 5 more pounds on a lift. Always. You just haven't figured it out yet. It's the consistency of staying with it for a long enough period of time. So that's, I don't buy into that. You know, I do buy into people make a lot of fucking excuses as to why they can't get stronger and why they can't get bigger. And if they would try to take every excuse that they're throwing out and then reframe it back to themselves as to how they can not make that excuse, they would probably make better progress. You know, example would be, I can't eat anymore. I'm eating everything I can. You know, I mean, there's no way I just physically can't eat anymore. You can. You just choose not to. There's a way, because I guarantee somebody else is eating more. You know, so there's
or more calories per bite,
stuff like that. So I don't even like the idea that the question, this is, you know, not to be, you know, offensive to the person that asked. I don't even like the fact that the question was asked, because that's telling me that you're already putting limitations on what you can do. And part of training, the bigger part of training, strength training, hypertrophy training, just training, is to be able to condition yourself to, you know, overcome adversity, to overcome resistance, to overcome, you know, resistance, you know, to overcome things, to be able to become bigger, to become stronger. But that carries over, you know, it carries over to business, carries over to work, carries over to a lot of other things. And, you know, to formulate a philosophy or an attitude based upon, well, if I put 3 to 5 years into something, then that's as best I'm going to be. Well, is that going to carry over to your job? You know, well, if I put 3 to 5 years into whatever craft or whatever trade that you are in, and you put it in, or you can't get any better than that, is that going to carry over? Is that going to carry over into, you know, your relationships, your family, your kids? You know, it's just, I don't like that type of thinking. So that's my answer on that. I don't know where else to go.
Okay. We did say training, business, life.
Mm-hmm.
This guy said how to meet women.
God, I'm the wrong person to ask on that. Fuck. Ah, man. I don't even know when I got married. I mean, I met Tracy when I was in college, like my second year in college. So
was it the day you met her was when you were maxing out the cable machine?
Yeah, I was maxing out lat pulls and broke the cable. and did a backflip off of the machine. You know, obviously impressed her, I suppose. I don't know. But it's been a long time, man. I'm not the person to ask on that one. I guess if I was to give any advice, you know, as being somebody that's been in a relationship for a very long time, that's had a lot of ups and a lot of downs, you know, and big ups and big downs, don't be fake. You know, just be yourself. You know, if you're always yourself from the very beginning, and you're not fake, and you're not lying, and you're not, you know, being something that you're not, then it's never going to blow up in your face. You know, if you're trying to act like you're somebody that you're not, and then that attracts somebody, they think you're that person, then when they find out you're not that person, they're going to be gone. So you just,
that's what every guy does too, to try to impress girls.
I know, and it's going to blow up on them every single time, because as soon as a relationship, you know, begins to solidify itself and turn into something that's a little more serious, and it's probably happening on both sides. You know, there probably needs to be a conversation on, okay, what part's really fucking real here? You know, because you got to figure out, you know, what's real, because if you don't know what's real with each person, and you run into your first big obstacle, you know, you might find out, you know, it's not the person. You might find out you're not the person that you thought you were, or, you know, your partner's not the person that they thought they were. So the more real you can go into it, the better it's going to be. You know, not saying that your partner's going to do the same, but at least you'll know.
There you go. Good advice. Let me see here. Got my own home gym, squat rack, bench bar, plates, kettlebells, and some bands. Want to invest in one specialty bar, and I'm thinking about the safety squat bar because of effed up shoulders. Thoughts?
Yeah, that's where I would go. The yoke bar, you know, if your shoulders are screwed up, obviously it's going to take the load off of the shoulders. It's also going to allow you to, God, there's so many variations of different things that you can do with that. A lot of people have a hard time doing good mornings with a straight bar because it's rolling all over their back, where a safety squat bar has got more padding. It's not going to sit on your neck because you can push the handles up a little bit. So you're going to get more exercises. So when you're looking at a home gym and you're looking at a piece of equipment or a specialty bar, you want to look at how many things can it be used for that you're going to actually use it for. Like I can probably make a video of 50 exercises to do with a safety squat bar. And I mean, there's some of them on our old YouTube channel, like, okay, here, you can do it for curls, or you can do it for reverse curls. Well, who the fuck's going to use it for that? Nobody's going to use it for that. But so those are things. Don't worry about those type of things. What are exercises that you can use it for that can't really be replicated with something else? So on our shopping cart, actually, for the product, the SS Yoke Bar, there's a video of the top 5 exercises, and those are exercises that generally you're not going to be able to do with any other bar. Now, you can still use the bar for, you know, overhead presses and crap like that, but you're not going to.
Probably not your top 5.
Yeah, you're not going to. You know, it's going to be used for the Zercher squats. It's going to be used for good mornings. It's going to be used for upper back good mornings. It's going to be used for squatting. It's going to be used
triceps,
for the JM press, tricep extensions, stuff like that.
Okay. Should bands be used on the speed pulls done for dynamic effort lower? If so, what is the best percentage of band tension as compared to bar weight?
I think that's dependent on, it's highly dependent upon the person, for one thing, but I'll give a general recommendation and say 30% of, you know, the bar weight. Here's how I do it. Let's put it this way. If I wanted somebody to do speed pulls at 70%, and I wanted them to do 6 speed pulls, 6 singles at 70%, and I wanted to use bands, well, then I'm going to divide it up. Maybe 40% bar weight and 30% band weight. So I'm going to divide it that way. So that's what it's going to be at the top. That's how I go about it with the speed work. And I can adjust it here or there based upon how the bar looks when they're pulling, because when you're putting 30%, let's say that 30% is 150 pounds, and we have a deer scale in here so we can know exactly what that's going to be. You don't need to like double loop one side of the band and double loop the other side of the band and spend all this time trying to get exactly 150 fucking pounds of band tension. You want to kind of be in the range, plus or minus 10% or something like that. So people get too caught up, and because you'll tell them the band tension, say, look, it should be 40% band tension at the top of the squat. And then they do the math and they figure it out. And then they spend an hour trying to figure out how to set the bands up to get it. It's like, man, there's not that much difference between 32, 35, 40% band tension. Just throw the fucking band on, that's closest to whatever it is, and kind of go from there, especially with speed work. Speed work's got a bigger variance than if you're doing Circumax and stuff like that.
Okay. The origin of the 1 inch and 2 inch spacing, was that Louis' idea? That's all it says. So I'm not sure what that means.
I assume for a power rack, as far as the hole spacing, I don't know. I know that
if you're listening still, Anthena and Indigo, or whatever your name is.
I'm pretty sure they're talking about the rack hole spacing. I don't really know, because Louis did have them in the gym, but I also trained in a gym in Toledo that had 1 inch hole spacing throughout the whole rack. So, who know, what I'm saying? I can't say what the original origins of it kind of are. I know when, I was selling equipment for Louis, his racks did have the 1 inch hole spacing and the 2 inch hole spacing. And at the time, I believe there might have been one other company that had it, but there were other companies that had adjustable J cups that adjusted on the rack, so you couldn't detach the J cups from the rack, that were adjusting on 1 inch hole spacings as well. So now the arrangement of 2 inches to 1 inch to 2 inches, I don't know if I saw that before Westside. I don't know. And when I was selling them through Louis, that's how they were. And then when we kind of got in a bind, where Louis wasn't able to get racks, it's a long story that's going way, way back, but it sucked because we had customers that were waiting 6 months for racks, and the manufacturer at the time that was manufacturing for Louis, and I'm selling stuff for Louis, we had no idea what was going on. At that point, Louis was like, fuck it, I'm done selling the racks. I'm just going to focus on the reverse hyper and so forth. And then I had to go through 3 or 4 manufacturers to be able to find somebody to build pretty much the same stuff that was being sold before. And, this was with Louis' blessing, so it wasn't a big deal. But it was a big deal to find somebody willing to drill the holes, because it was a different process back then than the manufacturing processes that are happening today. Because you were paying per hole, and it's like, man, this sucks, and everything. And the worst racks at the time were like 4 inch hole spacing, and then I think the standard was like 3. I mean, it was pretty fucked up. So 2 inches, and yeah, so I mean, I can go on about equipment forever, but I don't really think anybody cares.
Yeah, that was about hole spacing, so you did good there.
Yeah.
Okay. This guy said, I pulled my hamstring doing Romanian deadlifts yesterday. How long does it take for it to heal so I can start squatting again?
Now that Jordan's gone, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physical therapist. It's out of my scope to answer that question, to say if you even pulled your hamstring or not. But what I can do is to tell you what I did when I pulled my hamstring and thought that I've pulled my hamstring, which happened on a few different occasions. And it's what I did. And that needs to be taken into consideration, because it doesn't mean it's what you should do. And the worst I ever pulled it was on a deadlift in a meet, and it was black and blue. That may not be the worst. The worst might have been doing a seated leg curl, just as an extra workout. Either way, it was bad enough that, I have a permanent hole in my hamstring, and it turned black and blue, and it bled my whole leg out, as far as bruising went. But what I did was, the first thing was to get full range of motion before doing anything else. And it was kind of a general rule that I lived by. If I hurt anything, pulled, tore, rehab, whatever it was, it's just general rules that I did for myself. I wouldn't do anything until I was able to have full range of motion. Now the hamstring becomes a little tricky, because what constitutes full range of motion, So to me, full range of motion was the ability to squat and the ability to deadlift, so nothing was loaded until I was able to get that full range of motion, which is not full range of joint motion, by the way. I'm talking full range of motion of the lifts that I was required to do in the sport. And this is actually one of the things that I feel I made with my own injury, comebacks and injury rehab and so forth, was probably one of my shortcomings, as far as rehab goes. But it always worked, so I always did it. So my range of motion was always determined upon the sport that I did. So I only cared if my hamstring worked when I squatted and deadlifted, and that it didn't hurt. I didn't care if I wasn't able to, do a ass to grass squat. Didn't make any difference to me. That wasn't full range of motion in my mind from the rehab standpoint. So with that being stated, what I would do is start doing pin pulls, or I'd either use a power rack or I'd use a Smith machine. The Smith machine was usually a little bit easier, and I would basically hobble to the Smith machine. Keep in mind, I worked as a trainer at the time, so I had access to, I was around equipment all day long. So, I kind of hobble over to the Smith machine and figure out, I would stand up with the empty bar, where on the Smith machine, it's actually, I think I had to put a dime on each side to make it 45 pounds because there's a counterbalance. And I would basically do a stiff leg deadlift down until pain. And as soon as it hurt, I came back up. And then the second rep I went down, I did not go into pain. I went just shy of pain. And then I would do sets of 20, 30, or whatever it was, all shy of pain, and then rack it, and then I was done. A couple hours later, I'd go back, do the same thing again, and maybe I got a couple more inches, maybe not. If I got a couple more inches, then I'd wait a couple more hours, come back, and then I would do it again. At some point, I was going to get to where I wasn't able to go any lower. It was kind of at its threshold, and then it would be done for the day. And I used a lot of ice, so I was a big believer on ice, which I guess is evil now, but it's what I did. It worked, so I'd ice the shit out of it after, all those sessions were done. And then the next day, start right back with the same thing again, and work it down and work it down and work it down and work it down. And then usually after 2 days, 2.5 days, I was able to get to a point where it was equal to where I would start the deadlift. And then from that point, I would start loading it, with, a dime per side or another dime per side or another dime per side. And keep in mind, all this is going, it's all pain free. So by the time I'm able to 2.5 days or 3 days, I'm able to get all the way down, it's still pain free. Now, when I start putting the load on there, now the pain's coming back again. So the range of motion's being restricted again based upon that pain, the muscle inhibition, and everything else. And then kind of work it down that way and multiple times per day. Usually by the second day, third day ish, with 3 or 4 sessions per day, I would be able to make it over to a seated leg curl machine, to which I would use very, very lightweight, use my strong leg and help get, the both legs down as far as I could, and then eccentrically load it. So it's a light eccentric loading with the pulled hamstring, and started adding that. So it was the stiff legs, then that, the stiff legs, then that, and the stiff legs, then that. And then the stiff legs would turn more into, once I got up to close to like a plate per side, I didn't have to do that anymore, because at that point I was good enough to be able to pull speed pulls or whatever it's going to be and not have to worry about it. Just the only thing I'd have to make sure is that it was going to be compressed and that I would wrap it. The hardest thing to build the strength back was always the seated leg curl. And once I was able to get that to where I could use like 50, 60 pounds, I mean, not a lot of weight, so just a little bit of the stack, then I would and I could use both legs at the same time. So it wasn't just one leg eccentric, it was both legs kind of doing the same thing with the same amount of force. Then I would transfer it to seated leg curls with a band and start hitting sets of 50 to 100 multiple times per day again. And then that Friday, which would be the Friday after the meet, so the Friday after pulling it, box squat with like a plate, maybe 2 plates per side. It wrapped, the hamstring would be wrapped, going to a box where there was no pain. Most of the time I had no problem getting down to the 14-inch box or 14.5-inch box that I trained on. That's how I did it, so I never really missed a squat session because of it. It wasn't comfortable. I'm not saying that's what you should do. If I have somebody that pulls a hamstring, I think they need to rest it and they need to work the range of motion first until they get the full range of motion back. And then once they get the full range of motion back, then they can start loading it, kind of going from there. It's kind of the same type of protocol I would use if I strained an erector or my lower back and never missed a squat workout. So, still think you need to see your, and these are, keep in mind, when Jordan was here, I was talking about, and I've talked before about how I had a physical therapist that I would call and run my ideas through to see if it's actually how stupid they actually were on a scale of 1 to 10. If anything was under like a 3, I wouldn't do it. But if you said it was a 3, I would do it, because it was worth it to me to be able to be back training normal within 2 weeks, no matter what the injury was. So that was my goal. With people that I advise now, it's not what I typically advise. I'd say give yourself, if it's a full tear and it's a full, seek somebody that knows what they're doing and give yourself 6 or 8 weeks before you really start loading it. I didn't want to give myself enough time to create any type of fear or inhibition, to be scared that it was going to tear if I got to a certain weight. So I figured if I got that over with, the bar and a dime, I'd rather get it over with then and then have to deal with it being heavier weights and thinking, oh shit, this is about the same weight I tore it at. I wanted to deal with all that crap when the weights were way lighter.
Okay. I could see this one being a 1-word answer. Is there any reason to train calves if your only goal is powerlifting?
Yeah, I would. It stabilizes the knee. So if somebody's got knee issues, and I mean, it's kind of an injury type thing here, but your calves stabilize your knees. People forget that. So I put in seated calf raises to help support the knee for those that are squatting, so they don't have knee pain when they're squatting. Simple things like seated calf raises and banded terminal knee extensions go a long way on keeping the muscles that support the knee strong, so the force is not being transferred, into damaged tissue that's in the knee. And a lot of times, my wife had knee issues when she was at Westside training there and squatted 365, I think is what her best squat was. Every time it would flare up, went right away as soon as she started doing seated calf raises again. So even now, if her knees start bothering her, the first thing she does is come out and starts doing seated calf raises, and it goes away. So that's where I think it has some application there. I used to joke at seminars, and and it's kind of it's actually a good way to show you how fucked up the industry is, and how gullible people will fall for anything, if people speak with the right tone of voice and, have somewhat of a name in the industry. I used to start seminars telling people that one of the biggest mistakes that they make on the bench press is not training their calves, and everybody would laugh, and I'd say, no, wait, seriously, man, listen, the transfer of power on the bench press when you're talking about leg drive starts at your foot. Your foot has to drive into the floor, and then from there it has to transfer, to the knee, to the hip, and to the upper back traps and into the bench, which in turn is going to transfer the force to the barbell going up. If your weak point, is your calves, and all that force is being lost because your calves can't transfer the force, that's killing your bench press. It's killing your lockout. And that's why you see a lot of people's legs, they'll start shaking on the bench, when they're trying to lock it out. Their legs, when it gets real heavy, that's why their legs start shaking. And even for some people right now, if I was to cut out the intro of my statement that I just made and just put this out there, people would think, holy shit, I need to start training my calves. I just made this shit up. So that's why you always need to question what you're being told. Always need to, not only question the source, but question how does it apply to you, how does it apply to your own training, and learn how to think for yourself and learn how to decipher information for yourself and kind of go from there. So I kind of used that as a trick, to be able to show people that, look, you'll fall for anything, if it's presented the right way, but you got to learn how to think, man. You need to, study some of this stuff for yourself, and you don't need to go in deep, man. I mean, just read the articles that we put on Elite FTS, and you will over a period of time become smart enough to detect bullshit, so what's bullshit and what's not. So it's not that complicated.
Okay. How to get thicker obliques?
Get stronger. The more you squat, the more you pull, the thicker your obliques are going to become. So, pull down abs. There's certain exercises that you can do to train the obliques, but most people aren't activating them properly to begin with. So I would work on your ability to be able to, flex your obliques and flex your abs and flex your lower back all into the belt at the same time. Kind of like you're trying to break the belt. so you know how to, not stabilize, but you know how to contract and keep that tight. You can, from an oblique standpoint, there's, tons of oblique exercises that you can do. It's just what value does it really bring when you can do something like a hanging leg raise, which is going to help open up the hip flexors. It's going to train the abdominal wall, the obliques, and everything else in between. So I'm a big fan of the hanging leg raise and the pull down abs. I think you put that in there, you're killing many birds with one stone.
Okay. What would be your ideal deadlift platform thickness for a commercial facility using metal plates? No one lifts above 700 pounds. 3/4 inch horse mats, easily accessible.
Here, the horse mats are easily accessible. I get that. The mats are easily accessible. I understand that too with the mats, but you start getting too many mats, you're going to start getting dents, that are in the mats, which are going to create, some issues with that too. So I don't think, just piling mats on top of mats on top of mats on top of mats is going to be the answer for a commercial facility. If it's a build your own job, I would go with, a layer of 2x8s, at 8 foot length, or cut at 8 foot, and then get enough of them so you got an 8x8 platform. Basically is where I'm going with this. So if you go by 2x8s first, then you can get 4x8 3/4 inch plywood, put that as your second layer. Then the next layer on top of that, you can kind of crisscross and go with the 3/4 inch plywood again, or you can even go with 1/4 inch plywood for that top layer, and then some type of office carpeting, to be able to put down, so it's not thick carpet, it's thin carpet, so you get a good grip on that. And from that standpoint, you're going to have, a platform that's going to basically take sound, and it's going to take the damage, but if something happens to it, then all you need to do, if you catch it immediately, if you catch it soon enough, you'll know, because you'll start to feel a little hole in there. All you need to do is replace one layer of 1/4 inch plywood. Now, if you want to put rubber should be underneath it first, because the overall flooring should have rubber on it. That's the way I'd go about it, or buy one that is a mixture of wood and rubber.
Okay. Are there any general changes you would make to a standard 3x5 or 5x5 novice program for an overweight 16-year-old male?
Aerobic work. So on your days off, walk for 20 minutes, or walk for however long you can comfortably walk for. Mentally comfortably walk for, not physically, because I'm sure you can walk for 20 minutes. I'm sure you can walk for a lot longer than that. But you want it to become a habit. So start it, 5 minutes if you have to, 10 minutes, and work it up to, 30 minutes, something like that. Whatever you're mentally able to tolerate, which there's going to come a time to where you're going to hate it at first. I'm not going to bullshit you at that. You're going to hate it at first. But there's going to come a time where it's okay, you want to do it. You look forward to doing it. And that's where you want that time period to be, somewhere around 30 minutes. So you're getting that. So you're burning more calories in a way, but you're not burning a shit ton of calories. But at least you're keeping the blood flow and nutrients, moving throughout your body more than if you're just fucking laying on the couch. So I'd go about that, and then, eat better. That's probably the easiest way I can make it. I've yet to speak to anybody that doesn't know the difference between everybody. I understand now why everybody's confused when it comes to, diet and nutrition and all, because there's so many things that are being thrown at you by so many different people, and that so many experts that say this and say this and say that, and they're all contradicting each other and all this other stuff. I totally understand where the confusion comes from, because fuck, they're confusing each other at this point. But I've yet to meet a person that if you have, you know, a table full of food and there's junk food on there and then there's better option, healthier type foods, I've yet to meet a person that doesn't know what the healthier options are. You know, so just make better decisions with what you eat. And I don't want to hear shit like, oh man, I heard fruit was really bad. Well, if fruit's on the table and so is a fucking meatball sub, what's going to be a better fucking decision? You know, it's, you know, somebody will probably contradict me and give me a bunch of bullshit because of the sugar and the fructose in the fruit and the fucking pesticides and all the other stuff and the protein and all that would be in the meat. But come on, you know, we're trying to, we have to make this easier for people that are trying to lose weight, just to be able to make a fucking reasonable, smart decision between what is good and what is bad. And it's frustrating seeing that all those lines are starting to be blurred by people who are simply just want to make more money. So in my opinion, most people get what's good and what's not, and if they're given two choices, which one is better than the other. So even if the two choices are bad choices, one of them is going to be worse than the other. Go with the one that's less worse and go from there.
Okay. What were your thoughts on Kahler Wolf's big 953-pound deadlift at the Slingshot Record Breakers? Did you see that?
Yeah. He's a lifter, man. You know, it got white lights. That's my thoughts. You know, I don't, people can, and they do, and it's never going to go away. I wish people would learn this. Lifts will pass that people think shouldn't pass. That's been that way since I first did my first meet in like 83. And it was that way even before that. You know, it's always part of the sport, and it's always going to be part of the sport. And it's not a bad thing, because people talk about the sport then. You know, so how much, I mean, normally I don't hear about high squats and stuff like that because I don't follow a whole lot of people to be able to even know that. So if I heard about it, that means a lot of fucking people were talking about it for me to hear about it. So forget if it was good or bad. Just the fact that people are talking about it is good for the sport, because it's attention to the sport that it otherwise wasn't getting. All right. So that part of the sport is never going to go away. It's like Monday morning quarterback. You know what I'm saying? So I don't care, you know, what people think of a lift. As long as the judges passed it, then it's a good lift to me. You know, sometimes the critics, you know, if I dig deep into the critics and like who is doing the criticizing, you know, for most cases, you can always go back through their own lifts and find shit that shouldn't have passed. You know, I was a judge in three federations, I believe, APF, IPA, and almost the USPF before it changed into a different federation. But I was accumulating the hours. So it's, you know, the APF, I had the hours accumulated. You know, to be a judge, you had to take a test and you had to sit, you know, and kind of like be a minion next to other judges for so many hours until you were able to judge on your own. Then when you judged on your own, you had to have somebody sitting beside you making sure you were making the right calls, and that's how judges were kind of selected. And that wasn't the case with one of the federations, that it was just a written test for that. But so I don't know how it all works now from that standpoint, but I can look at a rule book and probably find a reason to red light anybody's squat or anybody's bench or anybody's deadlift if I look at it enough. So kind of like the pot calling the kettle black a lot of the times when you start looking at it. And you typically won't see top lifters criticizing other top lifters. It happens, but usually if it does, it's something that's been taken out of context. So I know what the question's asking. They're asking me if it was a good lift or if it wasn't a good lift. So my answer to that was there's 3 white lights. It was a good lift. Here's the problem that I've always had with the criticism though, is while it is good for the sport because it does get people talking about the sport, why in the fuck are the judges never the ones being called out? Why is the lifter got to be called out? The lifter's just playing the game. The lifter's doing the sport. And I've twice in my life, I've seen 2 benchers, maybe 3, turn down a lift that they didn't think that they made that was white lighted, and it got overruled by the judges and the scores table. So you can sit there and say, well, if the lifter doesn't, if he sees it on a video and he doesn't think it's good, he should turn it down. Bullshit. It doesn't fucking happen that way. It doesn't happen that way in any sport. It's the judges. So if you want to criticize anybody or if you want to be an asshole to anybody, be an asshole to the people that fucking gave them the lift that you don't think was good. Call them out. All right? Because calling the lifter out isn't doing shit. He's just playing the game, man. He's doing what he's been trained to do, and what he loves to do. And it's not his fucking fault. It'd be stupid not to take the lift. The judges, on the other hand, you call them out, well then next time they won't make the same mistake if it's even a mistake to begin with. So that's where I stand on that. It's not gonna fucking change. So I don't really know where to go from there, but there's some things in the sport that are never going to change, and that's definitely one of them. That's never going to change. A lot of other things have changed in the sport over the years and can change. That's not one, because it still comes down to what I would call a dick measuring contest, and there's always people who don't like the fact that somebody can lift more than they do. So what they do is bitch about it. And that's just the way it's always been.
Plus, Kahler's a freak.
Yeah.
The next one was just what are some good or some exercises to build big shoulders? I mean, obviously there's shoulder press and the basic ones, but if you have any that you would recommend over others.
It depends what you're looking for. It's when I see a question like that, it's usually people want to have wider shoulders. This is when I see something that's kind of worded like this, like how do you build bigger shoulders? This isn't like how to build a bigger bench. This is more like a bodybuilding hypertrophy type of question. And the false impression that I've seen is people think it's all about the side delts. So they're just going to crank out, side delt raises, seated side delt raises, machine side delt, all kinds of side delt work, where it's really the rear delts. You bring up the rear delts, and that's going to make you look wider. So you got to focus on building the shit out of the rear delts. And usually when you look in somebody's training that's training for hypertrophy, you're going to see that there's not that much rear delt work to begin with. And if they are training their rear delts, they're not actually working the rear delts. They're working the lats, or triceps, or, traps, they're working everything except the rear delts. So they're not putting emphasis on, the technique to hit the muscle that they're trying to hit. So how do you do that in a simplified way? Just lighten the weight and focus and lower the tempo and focus on, do you feel this in the rear delts, or do you feel it in the traps or the lats or wherever else? If you feel it everywhere else except the rear delts, then change the position, change the angle of the movement, change the setting of the machine. Change, your chest position, change whatever you need to change to be able to feel it in the rear delts without a lot of trap activation, because usually trap and lats are going to be what is going to take over for what they're not actually doing. And the odds are your rear delts are probably really fucking weak. So you're not going to like the weight that you're going to have to use. So if you got to use 10-pound dumbbells or 5-pound dumbbells to be able to feel it in your rear delts, then that's not a bad thing. That's actually a really good thing, because you're starting at a really, really low starting point, which allows for you to make a lot of growth and a lot of added stimulus adjustments, over a period of time. That's going to help grow the rear delts. So if you're starting at 5 pounds and over a period of a year you get up to 40 pounds with the same technique, I guarantee you your rear delts are going to grow. Where if you can start at 35 pounds, you're probably not going to get up to 80 pounds. There's going to be activation of too many other things going on, for you to be able to get there. So that's what I would focus on, is the rear delts, and then movements. And you got bent over rear delt raises, you got chest supported rear delt raises, you have cable crossover rear delt raises, you got rear delt machines, you have, band pull aparts, you got band face pulls, you got, all kinds of shit that you can do. So it's finding exercises for the rear delts isn't the problem. Doing the exercises so you feel them in the rear delts is the problem, but that's a problem you have control of.
Okay, here could be a good one to end on. Notebooks. You carry one around and you seem to use that quite often. Why and how do you get started on doing that? And what is the purpose for you? What do you use yours for, essentially?
Yeah, it's interesting. Jordan asked me that yesterday on his podcast. I used to use a Franklin planner. It's going all the way back to before there were fucking computers. I used to use, oh shit, God, we're going way back, probably 88 or something like that. Just from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that had a Franklin Covey, then there was Franklin Covey Planner. And then from that, it was just a way to, organize your work, your to-dos, prioritize, the work that you have for the day, as well as have, a calendar of, where you're supposed to be, of appointments and so forth. I have no need for the calendar anymore. So it started way back in 88. So it's just been something I've always used. But, there were some limitations to it where there wasn't enough page space for me to keep like a training log and other kind of shit like that. I wasn't able to keep enough notes that I wanted to keep and so forth. So there's no need today for me to have to keep a calendar, in a notebook, nor would I want to, because if I lost it, you'd be fucked. But the notebook I use for multiple reasons. Every day I write down 3 things that have to be done. And those 3 things that have to be done are things that are going to help move me or the company forward. So they're non-negotiable. It has to get done. So they're the highest priority items. If I can get them done all before 9 in the morning, great. If it takes me until 1 a.m., then it's going to take me until 1 a.m. Or they can also be parts of a project that's being worked on that has to be done. So it's not like these 3 items are things that can be completely executed from start to finish in one day. It could be a piece of an item that has to be executed to be completed. So those 3 items are the most important. So being able to write them down and look at them, every night or in the morning whenever I do it, usually it's at night before I go to bed, I'll put down what the top 3 things are for the next day. It may change that next morning, but by putting them down before I go to bed, then I'm not thinking about them while I'm trying to go to sleep. So it's kind of like, dumping my brain on a paper. Once those 3 are down, then there's a second column that will develop as soon as I get up. And that's, as soon as I see the emails that come in and everything else that has to come in. And that's just a basic task list of shit that I have to do. Now, all that shit has to be done, or some of it doesn't have to be done. Some of it has to be delegated, but none of it's going to trump the stuff that I have to get done on the top 3. So the top 3 are going to get done, but it doesn't mean they're going to be done before everything else. So I may knock out the first one, then knock out 5 or 6 things that are on the administrative list, because that's going to keep growing throughout the day based upon what I'm doing, or the delegation list, where usually a delegation list, if I'm operating effectively, it's not even going to hit the list. It's going to be delegated before, I'm going to get it. It's going to be delegated and I won't even have time to write it down. It's just a matter of being able to track who it got delegated to and when it's supposed to be done. And I use a different program, I use an app for that, which is OmniFocus, which shares with my phone and so on. So the things kind of get dumped in there that are delegated out. So I got it for the big 3. So the Covey called them your 3 rocks. So I got them for the 3 rocks. And then I got a lot of pebbles, a lot of little pebbles that go in there. And then thoughts and ideas go in there, so that I usually write differently. I could write, flip the book upside down, write it that way, or I could write it a landscape way. So if it's a thought or an idea, it's written in a different way. So when I flip back through, I can find it a little bit easier than what's typically done. What I'll also keep in there is a master task list for the month. So there's, in this one here, there's a master task list for November, which has everything that I would like to see completed in November. They're not all big items, but they're all items that I would like to see get done. Do they all get done? No. Do the most important ones get done? Yes. The reason I keep the master task list is there may be a day where I wake up and I don't know. It's like, fuck, man, what are my 3 things for today? And then I look at the master task list and I can find them. There they are. Okay, I forgot about that. So I don't forget about it. There's another list in there somewhere for blog ideas. There's another list in there for Instagram microblog ideas. There's another list in there for Instagram posts that I've made that could be could be repurposed as blogs. So it's just a way to keep all my thoughts in one place. It's not. I don't have any training shit in there. I haven't had a training log forever. I don't use a training log. There's different reasons for that. I can usually remember all that, but that's what I use it for. So it's more, you can say it's for to-dos, but it's really not. It's more to collect ideas. 'Cause you forget shit, and I can't rely on my own memory, to remember everything. So that's how it goes. I probably go through 4. I probably go through a book a quarter, depending upon what it is. Now, if it's, I'll be speaking at, this is a good promotion for Swiss 2020. I'll be speaking at Swiss 2020 and the topic isn't going to be business. It's not going to be something that's, it's going to be a topic that's going to take me a little bit more thought and a little bit more time to put together. That will probably take a whole book in itself before I even start putting any type of slides or anything like that together. So that will have its own book, because it's a big project. So big projects will end up with their own book. So that's it.
I got one more quick one that just came in if you want to take it.
Yeah.
Dave, I'm a mid 750 deadlift and I tend to miss at my knees when going for 770 plus and usually hitch. What should one do to overcome this?
That's really hard to tell without seeing a video. If you can DM me a video of you deadlifting, on Instagram, that would help.
At under the bar.
Yes. Normally the problem with the deadlifts that I get sent is right you're going to see that there's a point when you're pulling, and at that point you start trying to like almost good morning and arch the bar to the finish, to the lockout, where what you really need to do is just drive your hips forward instead of arching the bar. So I can't tell you at what point to drive your hips forward because I have to see the video. Some people, that point might be mid shin. Other people, it's like a few inches above their knees. So it all depends upon, torso length and stuff like that. But a lot of it is just, making your arms longer, trying to make your arms as long as they possibly can be, and trying to shorten the distance the bar has to travel as much as possible. But normally if you look at where that bar's getting stuck and you just held an empty barbell in that position where it got stuck and you don't actually arch anymore, but all you do is keep that position that you're in and push your hips forward, what you're going to find is the barbell probably won't go up that much more on your quads at all, and you'll have it locked out. So what essentially ends up happening is you end up pulling it 3 or 4 inches further than what you really need to, because you're not using your hips to finish the lift and you're trying to arch the bar to finish the lift.
Okay. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys. We're done.